Okay, so Snowden is in Hong Kong, and he came out with a new accusation recently. He says that the Americans are hacking the Chinese. Go think. The Americans are hacking the Chinese. So this is obviously a very suspect accusation. Why? Okay, first of all, he is in Hong Kong. Hong Kong, by the way, is politically part of China. Okay, it does have independent status, autonomous status for certain purposes, but it's politically it is China. And so he's clearly seeking asylum there. And so why did he even choose Hong Kong? Why did he even choose China? So obviously, we all know that the U.S. and China are having this beef about espionage, cyber espionage. So it has been proven, obviously, the Mandiant report in the New York Times, that the Chinese have been spying on the New York Times and on other corporations in America. Economic spying, that is. Okay, there's sometimes spying for political purposes, and I'll get to that in a moment. But there's also economic spying, technological spying. They're trying to find out how American companies do business, and actually know how they manufacture things. Okay, so they want trade secrets, and so the U.S. has called them out on this. Okay, for many years they've been trying to perhaps negotiate with them and under the table without having to publicly shame them. But after they continued spying, then finally the U.S. officials recently, including Obama, has recently publicly spoken about this, that the Chinese have been engaging in cyber espionage against American corporations and government targets. But so the case of Snowden saying that the Americans are doing the same with the Chinese is obviously it's a huge revelation. If it is true, then it completely undermines the entire American claim and claim of being targeted and being targeted by the Chinese. So the question is it true? So here's my take on this. I find no credibility in this claim. Okay, why am I so suspicious of this? For one, the ulterior motive here is stark. I mean, he wants asylum there. Clearly he wants asylum somewhere, right? And so it so happens that he's in Hong Kong, and it is going to be difficult for him to get to another country undetected. And so he wants political asylum, and most likely in Hong Kong or in China. And so he wants to say something that the Chinese can seize on. Okay, he has the credibility because he's been working for this contractor. What's the name? Boaz something. This NSA contractor. And so if he says that the United States government is spying on the Chinese, then now the Chinese have the best excuse, because the Chinese are excellent at not addressing the actual accusation, but rather counter-accusation. This is a very common form of defense for people who do not think logically. Okay, people who have a guanxi sort of relationship where it's all about person. So if you accuse me of something, I can accuse you of something. So basically it cancels out the whole accusation. So that's basically the Chinese way of responding to the American allegations of cyber espionage, to say, you're doing it to me. Okay, basically that's discussion, that ends the whole discussion. It doesn't address the question of, are you doing it to the United States? It's just basically saying, you're doing it, so don't talk about it. Now, so the question is, are the Americans doing it? So, like I said, I don't believe that the Americans are engaging in cyber espionage against the Chinese. And here I'm going to tell you why. Okay, people love reading the news without just skimming the surface. Okay? This is accusation, that accusation, blah, blah, blah. You make like a whole hype out of it. And they love the explosive part of the news. Okay, the part of punch here, punch there, this boxing part of it. But they don't want to understand the actual underlying reasons why people and countries might be spying on one another. And here's the reality. Okay, the reason the Chinese are spying against American corporations, and like I said earlier, there's two reasons. One is they're doing it for trade secrets. Okay, so if you're building a plant to manufacture something or to process food or whatever, then you want to know what is the best way of building the plant. What is the best way to put together a certain product? What is the best way to construct an assembly line? So these are all important things for the Chinese, since the Chinese are not innovators, as we all know. So if they can't design the assembly line, they need to copy the assembly line. And of course, if you hire an American corporation to do so, it costs a lot of money. Okay, because it costs a lot of money to design. So in order to give away the secret, they would have to pay a lot of money. And since the Chinese are not economically developed, so they don't have the money, and so the best way to do so is to, or at least one method of trying to glean those secrets from developed countries is to engage in this form of computer attack. So clearly there is an incentive to engage in this. And here's the other thing that I wanted to mention. The other thing is called a political attack. So this is sort of the sort of attack that you would have. The New York Times would fall under that. So the Chinese were obviously suspicious that there was some mole in the government that was basically transferring information, informing the New York Times about what was happening, about this whole scandal, about the president of China, I forgot his name, Wen Jiabao, I think. Was about him. So Wen Jiabao was amassing a huge amount of wealth through his connections, through his guanxi, and so the New York Times was having an extensive article about this, of how he was enriching himself at the expense of the citizenry and at the expense of the state. So the Chinese believed that there was a leak in the government who was passing out all that information to the New York Times, building the case against Wen Jiabao. It turned out that that wasn't the case, but we understand why the Chinese would want that, because they could punish it. If there's a leak, they want to punish the leak. Okay? Whereas for America, nobody cares about a leak. I mean, this is America. Comparing America to China in this regard is like comparing apples to oranges, for lack of a more imaginative kind of idiom here. The Americans are an open society. You can say whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. We don't go after people who leak things. The only exception obviously is Snowden, right? So if you leak classified information from the government, that's a different story. But I mean, there's no such thing as going after somebody who leaks openly available information and just shames a government official. I mean, if you were to, let's say, Weiner, what's his name? Anthony Weiner, right? So the person who leaked his photo, there's nothing he can do. Everyone's laughing at him, right? I mean, you press the wrong button on Twitter and you leak the picture of your muscles, and there's nothing you can do. You can't take it back, and nobody's going to get punished for republishing that photo. So at this point, nobody has protection. The only exception to this rule is if you're actively infiltrating the American government and insidiously retrieving classified information and then disseminating that. That's a different story altogether. Okay, in that case, the United States will go after you. But that's not the kind of thing that happened in China. You can't even say anything. Forget about classified information. Forget about things that are that are embarrassing to officials. You can't even say openly anything that's even slightly critical. So it's a whole entire different take here. So the Chinese have good reason to go after political dissidents, okay, to shut them down and to shut them up and to shut them down, okay. They don't and to punish them, and many of them actually disappear. Okay, so we don't know, there's this whole gulag system here where political dissidents disappear. So clearly, America and China cannot be compared in this respect. America has very little reason to go for political reasons to engage in espionage against the Chinese. Okay, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to find out about a political official in China? How is that going to help you? I mean, we know basically what their agenda is, what their goals are, and the same reasoning that you have for Chinese to find out about American the political system doesn't apply on the opposite end. So and of course, for economic purposes, it definitely doesn't apply because there's no economic data. Not economic, I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong term here. There's no trade secrets, okay, that the Americans can possibly benefit from by finding out what's happening in China. Okay, so essentially, so what Snowden is saying, that the Americans have been attacking the Chinese through, he's saying that they've been launching cyber attacks against the internet service provider, the Central Internet Service Exchange in Hong Kong. So this is a very suspect claim, and of course they didn't provide any documents. And when the reporters tried to contact the Hong Kong exchange, the actual internet service provider, they say it never happened. Okay, so essentially this is a very, very suspicious claim, and the motive for making that is clear, as I mentioned earlier, and at the same time, in the typical Chinese fashion, you don't need to corroborate your claim, you don't need to back it up by showing any documents, because if an authority says it happened, then it happened. So essentially, that basically settles it. And the whole oilam goilam, the stupid people that just buy it, yeah, Snowden said. Okay, Snowden, at this point, and he clearly lied. I mean, they caught him lying clearly about his salary, for example. He says he makes $200,000 from that NSA contractor, and that wasn't true. So Snowden is not a credulous source anymore, and especially when it comes to the question of are the Americans engaging in cyber attacks against the Chinese. Now, I'm not saying that it definitely didn't happen. I'm just saying I don't believe him, and nobody should. And I'm saying that people should be very critical about this claim. And we need to understand, two questions, maybe more. One, what would be the motive? Okay, we clearly understand what the motive is for the Chinese to cyber attack the Americans, but we don't know what the motive and in what domain, in what particular field they are attacking Chinese systems. And secondly, show me the documents, show me the proof. Like, the Americans made a very clear and open claim as to the kinds of attack and the target of the attack of the Chinese against the Americans. The Mondiant reported everything, and in very specific detail, and they even managed to zero in on the actual site where the attack was taking place. It was a building in Shanghai where the attacks were originating from. And so in that case, as much data as could have possibly been provided has been provided. Whereas in this Snowden case, he's purposefully being vague because he can't give more specifics, because he will be refuted. He will be repudiated if he did. Okay, he will self-destruct. Okay, so that's why he's being vague, it seems. And if that's not the reason he's being vague, then tell me, please, show me the documents, tell me what's going on here. He's not giving enough details. So this is why I say that he needs to be, at best, I would consider his allegation suspicious, and at worst, I would just flat out not believe him as of yet. If he gives me more reasons, then we can talk.